The Oneida Nation of the Thames is located in southwestern Ontario. The Oneida Nation settlement borders fertile agricultural lands and is along the eastern shore of the Thames River, 30 kilometers south of the City of London. In many First Nations communities, there are stories and experiences among Indigenous people of hate and racism. Regardless if it was subtle or blatant, the darkness that is ever present from the days of first contact between our ancestors and the settlers to even as recent as 2023 has remained as an obstacle.
My Oneida name is Dewazlegate, which in Oneida translates as an axe with two blades. My English name is Joel Abram, and from Oneida Nation of the Thames. And my background is currently serving as the Grand Chief of the AIAI, and currently served 12 years actually here in Oneida. 6 years as a chief and 6 years as a counselor.
My name is Olive Elam, Nee Dockstader, and I'm a member of Oneida.
Galo Hyundi Nyang Yats, Tahion Nibigidilot, Oniota Aga Nibigihanjut. My name is Martin Paulus. I'm Wolf Clan, Oneida Nation of the Thames.
Sagali Swagweg, Brandon Dockstader Nyongets, Ogwali Niwagi Dalod, Onyata Ag, Ungwe Huene. So I just said hello, my name is Brandon Dockstader. I'm Bear Clan from Oneida Nation of the Thames. I work for my community as the environmental manager, overseeing the environment, energy, and consultation department. As well, I was elected to our chief and council and serve on the economic development and infrastructure portfolios.
Tell us about a time you've heard, seen, or experienced hate or racism.
I think one of the most prominent that sticks out is when I was in Thunder Bay. I was walking down the street with my friend Rob, and we had just gotten to the city. He was there a couple weeks before I was. We went down to the store to rent some videotapes, and on the way there, this, it was the main thoroughfare, and a car slowed down, and a bunch of guys stuck their head out, and they went, whoa, 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 like that. And they went by, and we just looked at each other, and we were like, did that just really happen? Like, what the heck, right? And then we decided, since that they were probably cowards or whatever, because they wouldn't do that passing by us on the sidewalk, we didn't think, so.
My husband and I were just young, and we had just starting out, and we both had a job in London. And he says, well, maybe we should move up there for the winter because it's so hard, to get from here to London. So anyway, we were looking for apartments, and we'd look at the paper, and we'd go to the places that were advertised. And, oh no, it's been rented, So finally, I said, before we go, I'm gonna call and see. So that's what I did. And this lady that answered, that was renting the apartment, she said, and I told her right away because I was getting suspicious. I thought, maybe it's because we're native. So anyway, I thought, okay, I'm gonna call before we make that trip. So I did. So I told her right away, I said, by the way, at that time we were called Indians. I said, we're Indians. And she says, we don't rent to Indians. But it's funny, in my workplaces, I never encountered anything like that. I always had a friend, and I worked at the Lambeth, that used to be produce supply. I worked there 17 years. And I had non-native friends, and this one lady used to even come home with me and stay with us for the night, and then the next morning we'd go to work.
All the way through the education system. I mean, I remember being in grade 2 on a reserve school here, and there's the teacher. We're 5, 6 years old. She's jumping off the ground, strapping us with a leather strap that big around, I mean, we're only just little wee kids. So that's grade 2. Then throughout high school, you're getting a lot of fights there because it's your first interaction with non-native kids, so a big rough time there. Then even when I got to university, my first class in university was history. The history book talks about everything but First Nations in Canada. It was very one-sided, and it was angering, so I started, getting into it with the teacher. But that's the first time that really institutional racism hit you right in the face. This is what they're teaching the rest of the people out there, and it's absolutely untrue.
I grew up in a small predominantly white community outside of my nation. And there was very few indigenous colored people in that town. And I've had to fight people. People would come to me and try and fight me just because I'm brown, So like as a young age, at grade 4, grade 5, we've come a long way from that, but that's what I think of in terms of my first experiences.
What do you think causes hate or racism?
I think it's ignorance, somewhat isolationism, of not being amongst people, of other races and cultures and languages.
My kids have never experienced anything like that. They've always had non-native friends. And sometimes I think that it's us. Like we have a chip on our shoulders, if you know what I mean. And that causes problems. See, I raised my children not to be like that. So my boys always had non-native friends. They come right to the house, and play with my kids down the basement. And good thing about that is when they got to be teenagers, and the kids would come and they'd go down our basement and have a party down there. And I always knew where my kids were, on Friday nights because their friends were there. And it was all native and non-native friends.
I think it's ignorance. Like I mentioned, if you just would listen to what we're saying, study the true history of this country, and realize that we're all just human beings of a different color, a different, maybe come from a different area of the world, but our people are all about peace, and that's what we've said since the newcomers came, and it's just never caught on yet.
It goes back to, first contact, and it goes back to, a cultural inferiority where people actually thought that, our cultures, because we weren't Christian, that we were uncivilized, and like even in my field of study of archaeology, anthropology, that was born out of cultural inferiority, studying lesser cultures, and like, you see some of those scientists of that time, like they're measuring heads of people, and they're trying to understand, like, so there was just this position of lesser than that was born from the 1800s that still prevails today in academia and institutions, and that falls into people's thoughts, right? Like, and so I think that's the root of it, and it permeates in all of our politics today. It's a us versus them kind of mentality that a lot of people have, but we need to have a more loving, holistic approach. And I know that's easier said than done, but that's what just some people don't get, and I don't understand how people could be that way.
How can we move forward today for the sake of our future?
I think oftentimes when people see stereotypes, and because when you're out there, you see the people that are acting up, where you might see someone passed out in the street, or you don't see the people that are not like that, because they're out there doing the good things. They're at work. They're doing whatever. They're out in nature. They're doing the things that they're supposed to do with their family. And so a lot of times people get a negative picture by seeing the ones that are right out there and doing negative things. And so that, I think at that time, that colors a lot of people's perception. So, I think people should just be aware that that's what you're going to see. I might see a lot of, drunk white guys, for instance, but I'm not going to say that means every white guy's an alcoholic. You don't think that, right? Because you know that there's a lot of them out there that are working in offices or doing what everybody does. But for some reason, that gets, it doesn't get done for a lot of people of different cultures, where they see the negative out there somewhere, so they make that presumption that every person of that race or culture is that way, when that's not the case. So I think number one, that's the thing, is for people to treat people as individuals, with individual experiences and cultures, intelligence, whatever it may be.
I've worked for the church for so many years, and I've experienced a lot of racism. It's not all of them, but some. because I've gone to meetings like in London where I sat there, I gave my little report, with our little church, because we were small, and the rest of the people sitting around there whispering to each other, not even listening to me. Like they're not interested in what I have to say. So come lunchtime, everybody says, oh, let's go here, let's go there. I was never included over this, So I just go off by myself. Come 1 o'clock, it's time to go back. I go back. I think, that the more you ignore it, the more that they're going to know that they can't, that it affects you, but you don't let it show. At least that's how I've gone through my life. Maybe that's the wrong way, but that's how I get over it. That's how I get through it.
I think it's all about education. Like people are people, and we all have the same emotions and I guess sympathy for each other, compassion. So when they really know that we're just human beings and, we're basically the same as them, and we just want fairness, we just want equity, we just want, to be recognized for our position in this country. So, the rest of the world knows that when they come to Canada, they have obligations. It's not just a free-for-all.
Sometimes these comments and the way people speak, it's from their preconceived judgment, their bias, right? This one time I was doing a presentation on our water information, and this was a non-Indigenous crowd that I was speaking to, and when they had their questions, one of them was like, well, why can't you just do this? It's so simple is the way they thought of it, and the comments were so from a colonial patriarchal aspect. I was like I got upset, even though they were just asking a question. But from where they were coming from, it's like they didn't even bother to think of the history of why we are in this situation today. And that's and I think education and collaboration.
What is a way you can connect with someone to help them understand who and what your views are?
I think the number one way I'm doing that now is through the position that I have as Grand Chief. Working with government to change policies. As you know, a lot of government policy is based on, a lot of people don't know that, but it's based on racism from the 1400s, which really has no place in modern society. From the Indian Act and things that happen like residential schools, 60 Scoop, murder missing Indigenous women and girls. And so a lot of those things, are based on what's called the doctrine of discovery. And a lot of that stuff is baked right into modern government policy and legislation. And, as you know, we also have our weekly radio show, Our Stories, in which we try to present an Indigenous point of view on different topics. And hopefully people can see that, we're just people at the end of the day.
I guess I'm just going by what I used to tell my kids. Don't ever feel ashamed that you're Native. You're just as good as anybody else.
I think social media is a good start. It doesn't show the real human emotion, though I like to interact face to face, right? But part of the whole education process is an accurate telling of the history. So an accurate telling of the history, I think, will have people, begin to understand us better.
Yeah, I think one-on-one conversations are really important. There are so many things being said online and so much misinformation that you can get really swept up in what's happening and what people are saying, and the perspectives of a few can be really amplified. But you speak with those same people one-on-one, and it could be a completely different conversation. And I know some of my friends who have spoken kind of in a more what's the word, more discriminatory tone towards other people, having those one-on-one conversations and, just seeing where they're at, right? I think too many people get swept up in their emotions, and we got to kind of remove our emotions and say, well, why is this the way that it is? Why do you hate this person so much? And having that conversation, having that exposure, and I think people will come out of that more transformed in their views.
It is our hope that the stories and experiences shared here in this video can help bring understanding, awareness, and education to those who do not realize the kind of hate and racism that Indigenous people have gone through. In order to move forward and forge a new relationship between nations, we must let go of these negative views and work together.